my first drunk at 12. It took me till 42 to conceive to my innermost self that I could not drink alcohol safely. And then treatment centers started, and the psych units started, losing jobs started, and
consequences.
I was at ground zero. I was losing my children. I was unemployable. I had sold everything. I had cleaned out my kids' bank accounts. I had driven intoxicated with my children and scared them to death.
What's the best advice anybody has given to you, and how has it impacted your life?
As far as drinking and having cravings, it's going to pass whether you drink or not.
Labeled a slow learner.
I always felt a little bit
always
different.
felt like there was something wrong with me.
I was so embarrassed. Wasn't ready to see myself.
I can't go any lower.
Don't sell yourself short.
Uncovering all those feelings. Everything was lifted at that moment.
This really wasn't about not drinking.
Welcome to Crosstalk Podcasts. I'm Corey Raven. Well, what do we do here at Crosstalk? We do our part to inspire recovery from addiction and discover a better way. Whether you're considering a life free from substance dependency or already on that path, Crosstalk is here for you. Each episode, we do a deep dive into the experiences and stories of people who have walked the walk of recovery, alongside experts in the field to enhance our understanding of addiction and recovery. Our mission is simple: help you navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories on your personal journey to a better way. So buckle up and let's hit the road as we embark on this transformative journey together. This is Crosstalk Podcasts. And welcome to today. Heidi, we have a very special thing going on today. First time on Crosstalk Podcast that we have 4 people all at the same time and 2 special people. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Irene and welcome to Crosstalk. Thank you, Corey. And here we are today with Andrew and Heidi, and we're very excited to have you both and to hear both of your individual stories and then how you came together and helped influence each other in recovery. This is really exciting.
Very exciting. First time we've had a married couple in recovery on Crosstalk.
Right on.
Yeah.
Welcome, guys.
Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to be here.
The way we usually start this is we ask you a little bit about how life started, childhood. You can do it in 3 words, 3 minutes, 3 hours, whatever you like.
I basically was raised by wolves. I joke when I said that. I would say my family put the funk in dysfunctional. Put the funk in dysfunction. I was adopted at 3 days old. I was born in Miami. And my biological mother and father were high school sweethearts, and adoption was my biological mother's only option at that time. Things were a little bit different back then.
Do you know, were alcohol or drugs involved? Was that one of the reasons?
No, I do know my biological family now.
Okay.
And there's alcoholism and addiction in the family, but my mother, I've called her a raging codependent before, so that would probably be her downfall. And my father is not addicted to any type of substance, but there is alcoholism that's rampant genetically through my biological family. So at 3 days old, there was a Jewish family from right outside of New York, North Jersey, that adopted me. And they came to Miami and they picked me up at 3 days old. And at that point, they gave me a Hebrew name and something that's called a mikveh, which is a ceremony. And that's how I became Jewish. And I was raised Jewish for part of my life. And back then, so it wasn't through an adoption agency, it was through a law firm, and it was kind of like a gray type, wasn't black market, but it wasn't really legit either. So there weren't background checks, or it was a cash transaction. Wow. And it was a lot of cash back then. It was probably about 25,000, and that was a minute ago. So back then, the cash transaction was, and my biological mother did not receive 1 penny, I found out, for that.
Wow,
So-
where'd it go? The lawyers.
The attorneys, I guess. I'm not.
Damn lawyers.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. All I know is that it was a cash.
I'm one of them.
No offense, but and I don't even know if it was the attorneys. I'm not sure.
Right.
So there was a lot of mental health issues within that family, and by the time I was 10, my adoptive mother had passed away and was in and out of different institutions, and my adoptive father was unable to care for me. He tried the best he could, but just wasn't 100% there. Like I didn't know to brush my hair or brush my teeth or how to wash clothes or really take care of myself. So there was a lot of shame around that. And as a young child, not even knowing how to care for myself. And after she died, my father worked nights and I was home alone at night, and I went to school during the day, and it just wasn't a great story. And then I was pretty much bounced around to different families and people and friends, and there was a lot of abuse of all different types, and we'll just associate that with traumatic events and things like that. So the first time I was given alcohol was at free reign of alcohol. I was probably 12. Now, the first time I tried alcohol, I was 7. And this is a funny story. It was at Passover, and there's a certain kind of wine that's really sweet called Manischewitz. And everybody left part of their glasses on the table and went into the other room. And what's interesting, if there were half glasses of soda or something, I don't think I would have drank it, but I drank everybody's glass that was left over. And I remember getting at 7. And I remember it wasn't enough to get drunk because there were just little sips, but I remember getting that warm feeling, and I had anxiety at 7, believe it or not, and that those knots in my stomach just kind of went away. And I think that at 12, I wanted to get rid of those knots, which I now know as anxiety.
Right. And was your family open that you were and your brother were adopted?
No.
And did you know that there was that original primal wound? Or
No, I found the adoption papers in my attic when I was 8, and then our house caught fire maybe a month later, which my mother set the fire. That was part of her mental health. She had, like I said, a lot of issues. So those papers were lost, and I remembered a name in my head when I was 8.
wow.
So by the time I was 25 and looked for my biological family, I thought I had created this name as an 8-year-old, but I remember the name. And it actually was my mother's name.
And you reconnected with your natural mother when you were 25?
Correct. I was visiting a friend in Florida, and we were in Miami. We were in South Beach, and it was before cell phones. And we looked in a phone book, and we were at one of the hotels, one of the little hotels in Miami on South Beach, and there was a name listed, and my friend called her this woman, and it turned out to be my mother's stepmother, and my grandfather had died, so 2 weeks later she would have moved, and she gave my friend my mother's phone number, and I was at her house within the hour.
So between 10, 12, and 25, you want to give us a short synopsis of how that was?
Sure. So I had a stepmother that my father remarried maybe a month after my mother passed away, and then they got divorced quickly because it was a month after she passed away. And I think he married her to take care of me, and then they separated, and he sent me with her, and she was very abusive physically, and I left there and I went to live with a friend.
At what age?
11. to 12, and the friend's father was abusive. And she had an older sister who actually drank and did drugs and things like that. So we had a wedding to go to, the friend of the family's, I think. And this older sister gave me alcohol. And this is free reign. And I'm drinking everything she gave me because I'm trying to create that 7-year-old buzz.
Mm-hmm.
And I just drank everything because I didn't know what happened. And I started feeling dizzy and I went to go lay down. And if somebody had not come in when they came into that room, I would have died. I would have choked. I would have choked to death. My first drunk at 12.
Wow.
Yeah, it took me to 42 to admit I was truly an alcoholic. It took me till 42 to conceive to my innermost self that I could not drink alcohol safely.
Between that age and when you got sober at 42, were there times where you tried to get help?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what those efforts were.
So at 21, so by the time I barely graduated high school, and I say barely, I drank with my teachers and they let me grade papers, and that's how I got to high school. I had a learning disability that was not diagnosed back then. And I was always told that I was street smart, but just not book smart. And I believed it. I believed the lie. I believed what people told me. And so by the time I was 18, I moved out on my own. I got my own place. And life was really hard. There were times where I didn't have food to eat. There were times where I didn't have gas money. There were times where I didn't have a job. I was evicted from apartments. I've lived in my car. I've lived in motels. At maybe 19, I moved in with, I got involved with drugs and specifically cocaine. And I moved in with my dealer who became my boyfriend. And that led me to rehab. By the time I was 21, I went to my first rehab.
And where is this?
This is in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia.
Still, okay.
Yes. So I went to a place called Hampton House.
Okay, inpatient?
Yes, 30 days. And I was introduced to AA there.
Okay.
And I got out and I went to aftercare and I moved back in with my aunt and started to rebuild my life. And I went to AA meetings and there was I was 21. So there was a big young people's crowd. We did a lot together. We did a lot of events and socialization and it was great. And I stayed, I'm going to say dry or abstinent for almost 4 years from when I was about 21 to 25, close to 25.
What did you accomplish during that time period?
Fellowship, really fellowship, but I didn't change anything about myself.
Okay.
So
That's why you described it as
abstinent.
Abstinent and dry.
Well, life got better. Life got better. And and AA was very different then. There weren't a ton of women. There were a lot, and there weren't a lot of people who did drugs too. Like it's
Right.
hardly, you can't throw a rock and everybody has tried something other than alcohol pretty much. I mean, you have a few diehard alcoholics straight up, but there's usually other people, but you tried stuff,
Did you do the steps in that time?
No, I had a big book, and
Decor.
yeah, right. It was on my night table. I think it was the edition before this one, third edition maybe. It was a long time ago. And I sat in AA meetings and I compared myself. And I could say to myself that I had a problem with cocaine. It was really easy to do that. But I didn't have a problem with alcohol. Yeah, that I couldn't, and when I look back at the first 2 times I drank without any, reservation, and I blacked out. I almost died the first time. I got kicked out of where I was living the second time, yet I couldn't say I was an alcoholic.
Right.
And I think about why couldn't I do that? And I just, part of me rationalized, I just didn't know how to drink then.
Oh, right.
I just didn't know how to
Like
drink.
you can moderate it.
Exactly. I just didn't know how to drink then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's hear more about,
So at 20, close to 25, I realized that I thought I'm not an alcoholic. I don't need to go to AA meetings. I just need to have a normal life, quote unquote normal. My husband says normal is setting on a washing machine. Yeah, I like it too. And so I decided I just needed to get married and have a family. And that's what I did. I found a suitable husband who fit the bill for what a good husband should look like. And I got married and had kids. And I kept it together for 10 years.
So does that mean no drugs or alcohol, or does that mean moderation?
So
I say that and laugh.
it meant that I didn't use drugs. I mean, my ex-husband and other people smoked pot, and I was just not a big marijuana user. I just didn't like it. So it didn't bother me, but there wasn't anything around stronger than that. So, and I would go out to dinner we'd go out to dinner with other couples, and I would have 2 glasses of wine, and I would order my food around those 2 glasses of wine and what kind of wine I was going to get. And I would watch people and try and pace how I drank my 2 drinks, because I didn't want them to think I was an alcoholic. What I didn't realize, that this is the insanity part of this disease, is that normal people don't do that. Like, they don't focus, they enjoy their dinner, they enjoy the company and the conversation. They don't watch, and why is that person barely taking a sip of white Zinfandel? And why would they order white Zinfandel anyway? Their alcohol content is so low. Right? I mean, they need a box of it. Like, why would they even do that? And
people are so stupid.
Right? I just didn't understand that. But to me, that was, I was so careful that nobody would think that I was an alcoholic. And I loved to go out with people that drank more. And I kept that together for 10 years. And it came out in other ways. It came out in me trying to give my children the opposite of what I had as a child. I had a perfect house. I had the 5-bedroom house and the minivan and the mommy and me, and I was a stay-at-home mom.
Down here in Florida?
No, this was out in Philadelphia area.
Oh, still? Okay. God, I don't know why.
Yeah, my ex-husband went to work, and I went to, different.
So when and how did it get off the rails?
So we moved here. At Sunshine. We moved to Florida, and I, at that point, had met my biological family. And I have a half-sister who is, I'm just going to say I have a half-sister. I have 2 half-sisters. And we went out. I had not moved here yet. We went out with my sister, my ex-husband, who was then husband, and a friend of his. And we went out to South Beach, and we went out drinking and partying. And I wasn't blackout drunk. I was just really having a good time. But if I had not been drinking, I probably wouldn't have done this. So my sister said, "Oh, my coke dealers are on the corner. What do you think?" Now, I had not ever done drugs with my then husband. And we all looked at each other and said, "Okay." Now, if I had been completely sober, I would not have said okay.
Right.
I could honestly say that. So...
And your ex-husband said okay too.
He said okay too, but he had a few also, and so did his friend.
Right.
And so and the biggest thing happened that night. Nothing happened. Like, nothing happened. There were 0 consequences. We had a fun night and nothing happened. And
that's scary.
Yeah, that's the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Is that. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
So that was a green light. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's rock and roll.
Exactly.
I don't have a problem. Nothing happened.
Exactly. And by that time I was able to, we were buying a house here in Florida, and the marriage started to go downhill. And I started to go, I had some friends back from it that I met in AA years before that were not in AA anymore, living in Florida. And I started going out with them. and staying out all night and doing a little coke when we went out with them and drinking.
And how old are your kids at this point?
So they were young. My daughter was in kindergarten and my son was 1.5 years. And it wasn't often. I didn't do it often. It was every once in a while. Not enough. I was still, like I said, going to the gym with the women and going to lunch and doing the whole mom thing and play dates and all of that. So I was still very much present and still controlling my drinking. And then the divorce happened. And
You're 35 when the divorce happened.
I was about 35, yeah. 35, 36 when the divorce
So you
happened.
weren't paying attention.
Yes. And that's when the drinking progressed and the drug use, cocaine use progressed. And I moved to Fort Lauderdale where everything was pretty much on hand. And I had shared custody of my kids and I only used and drank when I didn't have them, and then it carried over into when I did have them. And then treatment centers started and the psych units started and losing jobs started and
Consequences.
all of that started.
Yeah.
And I would sober up and I tried different things. I went to a place that if you go, it's in Bill's story, he talks about the knowledge, self-knowledge. And this was about gaining self-knowledge, talking about your trauma and all that kind of stuff. And I had knowledge, like Bill Wilson said, and the goose hung high, right?
Yeah.
Until
Until
it didn't. Until I went on a cruise and said, I'm in international waters. It doesn't count if I drink. And that was the end of that. I was a month out of rehab. Yeah. So I was drinking again. And then when alcohol became a problem and cocaine became a problem, I knew I needed to stop. And I got out of I think it was a mental health facility at one point. And I thought to myself, this is, I need to go to meetings, right? I had gone to a couple of AA meetings. I need to go to meetings, but I can't go sober.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, well, I never had a problem with pills. So I'll take pills. And this way it'll take the edge off and I could go to these meetings.
Like a stroke of genius.
Yeah,
How much are you about opiates?
At first, I guess. I didn't know what I was taking at first.
Like it in Oxy.
Yes. And then once I got out of this treatment center, my go-to was okay, I need to find a job. I need to find a boyfriend. And
Priorities.
shocking, right? And I looked up, there was somebody online that didn't drink, but he did pills.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to opiates, to Oxycodone for the first time. And I fell in love, not with him, but with opiates.
Right.
With Oxycodone, it became my new drug of choice.
And so, where did that take you?
It took me to really dark places.
We're looking at a bottom right now.
It took years, and it took treatment centers, and it took, let's just say that I was at ground zero. I was losing my children. I was unemployable. I had sold everything. I had cleaned out my kids' bank accounts. I had driven intoxicated with my children and scared them to death. I had done the unthinkable. Any yet that was there, I had crossed the list off of the yets. There weren't, death was the only thing left. That was it was the only, and I'm sure that was the amount. And then I started drinking on top of that.
Did your kids try to talk to you? Did they tell you how they felt, or were they just?
They didn't know. They didn't. They knew, but didn't know. Mommy was sick. That's what I had. But by that time, my ex-in-laws they had a big house in Parkland. That's where I lived when we first moved here. I couldn't afford to live in Parkland, so they were wanted to keep my children in the same school, so they had a very nice lifestyle. And my in-laws and my ex-husband were raising my children. They all lived in a big house in Heron Bay together.
How old are they?
My daughter was 14 and my son was 11. They're 3.5 years apart.
Okay.
But I hit a real bottom.
And it was your decision to finally.
So the first time I got sober, I thought of ways to kill myself, and this time I knew I was too much of a coward, so I knew I had to get off of the opiates, but I couldn't do it myself. And like I said, I was living with some guy at the time, and I just crawled into bed and didn't get out, basically. Again, unemployed, just a whole bunch of consequences hanging over my head. There wasn't I couldn't even dig. The shovel was gone. Like it was like,
Like you were
it was the bottom.
Yeah.
Bottom, the worst bottom.
Did you end up going to treatment?
So my mother came over and she said, you need to get help. And I knew that I needed to get help. I had stopped drinking at this point. And I went to one meeting, but I couldn't stop the opiates. I was just addicted and I didn't want to get sick. I knew that feeling of getting sick, and I had gone through that detox and it was horrible. And so I knew I couldn't stop without help. So she said, you're going to treatment. And I always listened to her when she would take me. She took me to a women's dual diagnosis unit. And I was just hopeless. I wouldn't go to group. I wouldn't do anything. I just stayed in bed.
They help you detox.
Yes. And when I got there, I brought Suboxone with me because I knew they would give it to me.
So you were
I
on Suboxone.
Yeah. Well, I had gotten some.
You needed
Right.
it. When
Yeah,
you
it
had
wasn't-
everything else, you needed it.
Yeah, it was prescribed, and I was trying to detox myself. I had already gotten off the alcohol. I was trying to get off the opiates, and I was trying to do the Suboxone, but
I feel like that withdrawal is
I
worse
only
than-
had a few left, so I brought them with me, and they said, we give these to you. And I didn't know that they gave you Suboxone and it was the women's dual diagnosis unit, and it's no longer there. It was in Hollywood, where my mother lives, Hollywood, Florida. And I said to them, I only will take this for 3 days. I think I had 2 weeks left of this insurance that I had, Cobra or whatever. And I said, I'm only going to take this for 3 days. I do not want to leave here
Right.
on another. I need to detox, and I need to detox safely.
Good for you.
So please,
Did they listen to you?
yeah, I wouldn't take it after 3 days. So they weaned me off over a 3-day
They
period.
followed Dr. Heidi.
It wasn't that I was so afraid to leave on something. I will say that prior to going to that detox, I was detoxing and I was down on my hands and knees. And I did say, and I didn't believe in God because I thought, what did I do so wrong that God would give me this life, right? So I did say, if there is a God, can you please just take me or help me? And I look at that as the beginning of a spiritual experience.
I actually have 2 questions.
I'll allow it.
One question is, and I'm going to direct this, I think, to Heidi. What's the best advice anybody has given to you, and how's it impacted your life?
The best, I'll get a few things. A couple of things from my first sponsor. A few things. All right, I'll kind of from a few different sponsors. The first one would be as far as drinking and having cravings, it's going to pass whether you drink or not. The craving. That's a true statement. And even when I quit smoking cigarettes, that was a true statement. It's going to pass whether you drink or not. The second one is you don't have to make a decision today. Because, gosh, in the first year, I wanted to make all the changes, right?
That's hard for me still.
You don't have to make a decision today. From my next sponsor, relating to my kids and letting things go with their lives, is they're God's children first. That's a tough one. And as I mentioned with the clinical director, who's still part of my journey, you're going to be 70 with or without a master's degree. And I'm actually going to be not 70, I'll still be 57.
I was thinking that.
I'll still be in my 50s with a master's degree.
Honestly, that is exactly what I need to hear. So thank you for sharing that. That's so great.
And there's been scholarships because I'm in recovery.
How cool is that?
There's a foundation that actually paid for my entire master's degree. So, yeah.
So, and the other question I'd love to hear, there's another guy over here.
Yeah.
I want to find out if he has any experience with any of this stuff.